like that.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Really happy to be live with Angela Nurse. Second time lucky. After Facebook had a little paddy.
Yeah.
Do you want to start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your books?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Angela. I write crime fiction. My current series I've got is around a private detective called Rowan McFarlane. She's quite feisty and has a bit of a interesting attitude to rules, which I love. I've got a new series coming in the new year, which is a police procedural. So the main character has to pay a little bit more attention to rules. But I really like to write morally grey characters, and also my main characters are typically women because I love to write a good, diverse female main character.
And I read Rowan, the latest Rowan book, I think.
This one,
Yes.
yes, yeah, Lies She Didn't Tell. That was quite a fun book to write because there's a little picture in the front of that one of two Scottish Terriers, and they were actually my friend Annalie's dogs, and they were older dogs, and they both passed away. And she was like, "Oh, you'll need to memorialize them in a book one day." So I deliberately wrote the dogs into that book for her, and in memory of her little dogs, Jock and Wallace.
Well, that's really cute.
So
And they're
yeah,
quite I don't want to say integral to the plot, but they're quite nice extra additional characters, aren't they?
yeah, definitely. I think if you are a dog or a pet person, then you'll enjoy them particularly. But I really wanted to make them important enough they weren't just there, because it was like a wee tribute for a really good friend that she had her dogs memorialized in that way. But I really enjoyed writing them in because I think it was really outside of Rowan's normal character to be responsible for dogs. And so yeah, it was fun to include them.
I mean, she's not that great at being responsible for herself, is she?
No, she's really not. She's not good at being responsible for herself. She's very gung ho. She's very much I'm going to do this. There's not necessarily a lot of thought that goes beyond that. She's getting better. Like in Lies She Didn't Tell, she is much better than she was right back at the beginning, where she was even more frivolous in her behaviors. And so she's mellowed over the years as her working relationship and friendship has grown with Sonia Grover and also with DCI Johnson. But yeah, she doesn't have a lot of thinking, a lot of like self-preservation thinking.
I admire her chocolate cake for breakfast thinking.
Yeah, yeah. She is not very domesticated in that respect, and she doesn't really, in any aspect of her life, she doesn't really care about rules. She doesn't really like getting up early in the morning. She does get like still quite cringe worthy if someone asks her to like get up at to have a meeting at 9 o'clock. She doesn't enjoy that. So I think yeah, I think maybe she does the things that I wish that I could do without without comment. So like having chocolate cake for breakfast, it's just she's almost rebellious in everything that she does, but not as a statement, but just in the way that she is.
We've got some comments. Well, we've got some hellos. We've got one from Donna who said, "Woohoo, you both made it."
Hello, Donna.
I'm really happy that we actually got here. Because when I talked to you last, when we didn't manage to go live,
Yeah.
I think I was about just over halfway through your book and really enjoyed it. And then after we didn't go live, I actually got to sit and finish it.
That's good. That's good.
Which
I'm
is
glad.
brilliant. And unfortunately, we finished our top 10 recording for the year before we even got to our.
Never mind.
So I'll have to keep reading them so that they can feature on next year's one because I loved it.
I would love. Thank you. I'm really pleased you enjoyed it. I really enjoy writing Rowan, and that cast of characters is really dear to my heart. I think they've all become so integral in everybody's life, and that's why I'm going to pick a morally grey character. There's some characters in there that have really dubious backstories, and I think all of the people in them, you could kind of say, if it was black and white, this person did this thing wrong and this person should be punished, but I don't think life is necessarily that clear, and so I like to include that when I write.
Patsy said hello as well.
Hello.
Sheila has said it's great to see you both. She loves your writing.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. Much appreciated. It's always weird when you sit in your house and you write, and you obviously don't always get a lot of chance to interact with the people that read your books. And then if someone says, "Oh, I read your book and I liked it," you're like, "Oh my god!" And I know people are buying them, obviously, because I see people buy them. But like, there's also that kind of like, "Oh, that's really nice. Somebody bought my book." But also, there's part of me that's like, I don't know what to say now, because I'm like, I'm like, great, good, I'm glad. Because I think to myself, sometimes people might think, I wonder what goes on in your head. That must be an interesting place to be.
I think that about lots of people, though.
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes that you just want to. We were having this conversation at work the other day. Isn't there sometimes like you just want to be in someone else's head for an hour just to see what it was like?
Yeah, I
all the things they're thinking about.
Yeah, I think that would be fascinating. I think I spent a lot of my day job career working with people, both kind of like behind the scenes in a corporate environment, but also with the general public, in a facility that allowed me to talk to people quite deeply about their lives. And I think people are just really fascinating. Some of the stories and things that I've been told, you're like, it's wild that that's been your life, because I would never, you never know what's going on or what has come before when someone sits in front of you. And I think that makes people really fascinating. I think that sort of spills over into my mind. Some of those stories stay with me, and I take little bits of them. I would never plagiarize somebody's life, obviously, but I take little strands of the things that people have told me or I've witnessed over the years, and incorporate them into the people that I write. So yeah, I that's why I like a morally grey character, because I think there are a lot of people who you could easily, I suppose, easily write off or think or be prejudiced against, but have a bigger story to tell. I like to tell their stories.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting, I'm wondering if like that empathy and sort of understanding of people you got from that job is what like helps you to write such interesting characters.
I think yes. I think although I worked I worked for a bank. I was a bank manager for a long time. But what that meant was the majority of people that sat in front of me were people at their lowest point financially, which meant that I dealt with a lot of more challenging conversations and people when they really needed help. And I always tried to do all the things I could do. So I think that brings that out. But also, I think on a really personal note, I had not necessarily the easiest of childhoods and life. I've only had one. And so I think that creates an empathy for people who are other. So I had my daughter when I was 17. I was pregnant at 16, had her at 17. And that creates a whole realm of bias that people assume about you. And I think that just there's a lot of things that come together to make you think differently about people. Also, there's nothing like experiencing embarrassment from your own bias to remind you of not having it. So like there are going to be times, I'm not perfect. There's definitely times where I've seen somebody coming into the bank and I prejudge them. I need to be sat there and think, oh, I feel such like a horrible person now. And so I try to remember those things when I write, is that what's going to be the prejudgment of people. And once you strip that away, what's the reality? I think that's quite interesting. I think the way people look at other people is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think you're quite correct. Donna is struggling to make her top 10 list, apparently. She has 9 honourable mentions, which she feels is slightly cheating and is definitely cheating. You don't have a top 10 list with another 10 honourable mentions, can you? That's just the top 20.
Yeah. I think doing a top 10 of anything is quite hard, though. It's kind of like when someone says, oh, what's your favourite book? And you're like, well, this month, this year, of all time? Like, those are really hard questions, I think, to answer.
I've just got to the point in editing the video where Sam complains at us because we make her do it every year. And she hates making the top 10 list. And she's just like, we've got the first bit of the video where she's just like, I hate you all. You make me do this all the time.
Yeah. I think as well, like, it's really hard because there's so much good content to know what's the top 10.
I guess because I'm a teacher, I'm more used to being asked my favourite things, so I'm a bit more willing to just plump for something of just how I feel that day. Because when you're a teacher, you have to have an opinion about what your favourite dinosaur is, or your favourite biscuit, or your favourite motorway, or your favourite whatever. So you just have to kind of pick something.
I mean, there are things I do have my favourite of. Like I have favourite bridge, obviously.
Favourite Pokemon was one the other day.
I would have struggled with that, but I do have my favorite things. But I think transient things are things like books and TV shows and podcasts, that kind of thing, because those things can change. Those things can change depending on the day of the week. But I really like. I listen to a lot of nonfiction, like forensic science nonfiction. So I think listen to a lot of that on Audible because that's sort of a way that I absorb a lot of like information. And I never want my books to be super technical, but I do want them to be accurate in terms of the tests and things that happen, even if the time scale is seriously expedited.
No. Patsy said she's got Sally in the Woods to start tonight.
Excellent. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, that's book 2. That was fun to write. That was a lot of fun to write. The idea for that actually came. There's a place somewhere in England called Sally in the Wood, and that the idea came because we were driving our camper van, and I was looking at the sat nav, and I was like, "There's a place called Sally in the Wood," and I kind of thought, "Oh, wouldn't it be interesting if this happened?" And so that the whole idea for Sally in the Woods was born just from the name of the place that we drove through, and I happened to look at the sat nav.
Nice. Patsy says your next series, is there a new series coming out set near Dunfermline?
Yeah, so my new series is coming out on the 1st of January. The first book is called A Killer Conversation. It's a police procedural duo. So it's a DI, so DI Nancy Ravenscroft, and also a forensic linguistics professor, Professor Ewan Lang. And that is set in Dunfermline and surrounding Fife areas. They also got to go up the coast in Fife a little bit and into Anstruther. So yeah, so that's been a really fun series to write. I'm really interested in forensic linguistics, so I really wanted to incorporate a character that was involved in that. So that's the new series. First one comes out. It's available for pre-order just now, and it is out on the 1st of January. Paperback will be on the 1st of January as well, but the Kindle is available for pre-order just now.
Oh, I didn't even know that forensic, that was a tough word to say. Forensic linguistics was a thing. Well, I probably could have guessed it was a thing, but I'm intrigued to what it constitutes, because that sounds to be a really interesting book.
Yeah, so it looks at the way things are written or words are used. So a couple of examples used in that come to mind around whether or not language means a specific thing and what you can tell from a person from the words they use, like where you can tell where they might have grown up. You can tell potentially their level of education. You can tell all sorts of different things. You can tell if the same person wrote something. You can tell if there's words missing from passages. And it's been used in quite a lot of cases. So I think it was actually maybe 10 or so years ago, but a more recent case is there was a man in London who got his friend to kill his pregnant girlfriend and dump her body in the canal. And the prosecution rested on the text messages between the two young men, and they had used a lot of Jamaican slang in the messages, and they were trying to say that's not what it meant. And so the linguistics of those sentences were worked out to see if they could show like there was intent and there was this agreement to kill the girlfriend, which it was proven. And it's just really fascinating the way language works. And I'm probably going to go all nerdy on it now if I keep talking about it, but I just find it really interesting the way we use words. And from a bias point of view, forensic linguistics can be looked at. So in the Yorkshire Ripper case, the chief of the police officer in charge said in the news conference, and now he's targeting innocent girls, when the Yorkshire Ripper moved from targeting sex workers to non-sex workers. And it's about that kind of language and what that does to people's perception of someone's worthiness as well. I'm really interested in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds, and it's an unusual, because I think what I liked about the Rowan book I read was that she is not a police officer, and she's approaching this kind of really old crime in a different way. And as someone who reads a lot of crime books, sometimes reading something that's a little bit of a different way of looking at it is a really refreshing thing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much. So I'm really intrigued to what A Killer Conversation is going to be.
Yeah, so Professor Lang gets introduced sort of midway through the book, and then he's in every book in that series, but he's a real foil for the main characters. So Nancy she's not quite as brash as Rowan. She does follow the rules more because she's in the police, but she is definitely a very outspoken woman, whereas Professor Lang is much calmer. And I suppose if you were to look at like stereotypical gender roles, are a little bit reversed in this. Like, he's not effeminate, but he just doesn't need the masculinity, that type of thing for masculinity. He's very intelligent, and that's the thing that makes him that he's interested in his intelligence, rather than "Grr, I'm strong." He doesn't need to prove himself, which I quite like to write that dynamic as well.
Do you make sure that you post a pre-order link in the group later? Just
I will do.
Permission again, and that you message it to Ben for the newsletter.
Okay, I will. Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm very excited about the new series, and probably mostly because I like to bring in the forensic linguistics part of it. So yeah, but I could talk about it all day, because I could get very nerdy about forensic linguistics. I'm fascinated by it.
We love people getting nerdy. How do you write the books to be relatively standalone? Because I started at book 4 of the Rowan ones, and I've not read any of the others. I mean, that will be rectified.
Yes, definitely. I want them to be a whole story in themselves. There's a cast of characters that move through all of the books that are there more, some more than others. So Sonia's always there. She's the pathologist, and Alana, Rowan's daughter, and DCI Johnson, he is always there. But those relationships have really evolved. So when you go back to read book 1, I think you'll be like, oh, right, okay, this is where they started. Because there's definitely been huge growth in Rowan and those relationships, and the fact that she has allowed her community to grow and to trust more people has been a big part of her character arc. But yeah, the stories in themselves, I want you to be able to pick up any book and be able to go, okay.
I felt like I should have known people. Like, there's a cafe owner, isn't there?
Yes,
And I
there's
felt like I
Star
was
and Billy. Yeah,
something there. I felt like something's definitely happened before that's made
yeah,
them have like a relationship, but it didn't spoil my enjoyment of the book.
yeah. And I think there are always there's always slight sort of tells of things that have happened in the past. But I don't think if you then go back and read the other books, you'd be like, oh, that's spoiled. I think the fun thing about going back and reading Jack in a Box after reading Lies She Didn't Tell is you'll be like, oh, okay, this is a really interesting place that this relationship, particularly with Rowan and Billy, starts out. And you'll have also, and I do this, I don't always read series in order, but sometimes there's a comfort in knowing that something turns out in a nicer way than you imagine it might, and so I quite like that too.
Donna says she's totally sold on A Killer Conversation.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, I will. I wish I had a physical copy of it, but I don't. I only have my like my pre-order copy, and I actually don't know where it is because I was working on the final edits the other day, and I put it somewhere safe. But it's actually, I really love the cover for it. It's really like obviously a bit big-headed, but I think it's really stunning. With the Rowan series, I love the covers for those, but that took me quite a long time to get to that point, to get those covers how I wanted them to be.
I guess that's one of the joys / curses of being a bit more self-published is you can control the covers and the release dates and all of that kind of stuff, but then also it is also all on you.
Yeah, I always say to people the best thing about being an indie author is that you control your deadlines, your covers, your titles. No one tells you to change anything. And the worst thing about being an indie author is all of those things. It's all because it's everything that's good. Like there's just the kind of the flip of the coin. I definitely got the covers wrong on the first two books of the Rowan series initially. So those two books have had 4 different covers from the start, although the fourth iteration is actually very slightly different from the third. But it took me a couple of times of learning what covers needed to be like and what was important about that to get them right. But now I'm really pleased with them. Now I'm really happy with them.
Good. Someone else on here has said that it's a brilliant book and the cover is perfect.
Thank you.
You're getting quite a lot of fans. Like,
that's very nice. It's always nice to know that people have read and enjoyed and like what you do. I think, like I say, it's writing is quite an isolated job, and it's what I do full time now. Along with, I also do creative writing coaching, but I work for myself, so I am by myself and with my little mind like all the day because my husband works outside of the home, and so yeah, I think sometimes you can accidentally become a bit of a recluse.
We go the other way around. So my husband works at home, and I'm the one who goes out. And I am I'm so bad at working from home.
I think probably the thing that helps me the most is having a desk, having a space. But also, I think like I said to you before we went live, that I'm a master of procrastination. But also, once I get started, I can do quite a lot in not a lot of time. So I'm quite annoying that I can write 2,000 words in like an hour. So I can get a good day's worth of work done in not very much time because it's just the way I've always worked.
So how many books would you put out in a year normally?
So 2024 has actually been a really unusual year for me in that I haven't published anything at all. And that's been through a series of all sorts of things, from real life, moving house, having family dramas, and also having a very large fallout with my editor and having to find a new one. There's been a lot that's gone on in that space. But next year, I intend to release 3 books as a minimum. So two to three has been my sort of normal, but this year's been an anomaly that I haven't actually done anything new this year.
How do you find it getting out and doing things like literary festivals and things as an indie?
Very hard. I still think there is a disconnect somewhere between the traditional publishing, the festivals, and the readers. And I know that some readers will really care, and that's fine. But I think that the majority of readers just want to read good stories, and they don't care how they come to publication. And I think that doesn't necessarily translate back to festivals and the wider world. I would say that crime fiction is really, generally speaking, pretty inclusive. And then obviously we have like groups like yourself who are hugely inclusive and wonderful and lovely. And you definitely get that in some pockets. But I think there's definitely somewhat of a divide, and it can be much harder to be seen as an indie author. That's probably the biggest downside from a publicity point of view.
I'm on the good story is a good story.
Yeah.
Dragon.
And I actually think that for the most part, nobody's looking to see how it was published. I don't think most people even give it an awful lot of thought when they're making their purchasing choice, the majority of readers. And I remember that LJ Ross said something in a podcast once, and she was like, she can only write so many books in a year. So what she really wanted said to be hundreds of books available to her readers, because she wants them to be entertained in between her books, so they're still reading when she releases her next book. And I think that attitude of being like really inclusive, if it doesn't matter what you're reading as long as you love it, then it doesn't matter how it came to be on your Kindle or in your bookshelf. I think that the most important thing is that you find stories that you love.
Yeah, exactly. And how whatever format they're in is equally fine. 100% agree. And I think that's like the important thing, isn't it? It's coming across like those stories and recommendations from people.
Yeah, I definitely think word of mouth is the biggest thing for an indie author. That if people like what you've written, they've enjoyed your book, and they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else. That's the thing that I think is the most special thing about being an indie author, is that often people come across your books because somebody else has actually read it and loved it and recommended it. And so that you grow a really authentic fan base, which does wait for the next book and is really invested in those stories. So, and I think that's really nice.
Yeah, that's true. So while we're on stories and things like that, I ask everyone, and it is the end of the year, what's your new favourite reads of the year?
My favourite read of the year?
Or just your favourite reads recently, if you want. Have more than one.
My favourite read, let me have a think. So can I have two? Could I have a non-fiction and a fiction?
Right, you can absolutely have more than one. Have as many as you want.
So my favourite non-fiction read of the year is by Professor Angela Gallup. She is a very eminent forensic scientist, and her book is called When the Dogs Don't Bark. And it was hugely fascinating and interesting, and her life is really special when it comes to the world of forensics. She's made such a difference. When she went into forensic science, it was really all there for the prosecution. And so what she did after she'd been in that world for a little while is set up an independent agency, which meant that the defense had access to forensic information and could do forensic testing, which they couldn't otherwise have done. And I like the balancing of the scale, because I think it's always really important that everybody has access to fair information. And she was really super interesting.
Yeah, I've read that book. It's brilliant.
It is. She's just fabulous. And if you like that, I would actually also recommend Patricia Wiltshire's books. She's a forensic palynologist, so like botany and pollen and stuff. That's really fascinating.
Would be, and I am a biologist by training, but I really, really don't like plants.
Really? I don't think you have to like plants to like these books. So I think it's really interesting just the way that she approaches her work and how she came into the world of forensics almost by accident, because she worked in archaeology before that. But I would recommend her books. She's actually quite an interesting character. Favorite fiction? It's really hard. It's really terrible. I'm trying to think. What did I read most recently? So, I have been reading a series by a New Zealand author, GB Ralph, who writes a cozy mystery series. And at this time of year, I love a cozy mystery. And I love it's quite a playful, light-hearted series. So I would, if you're looking for something that's just not overwhelmingly stressful and is just light-hearted crime fiction, I would recommend that. And I also read the most recent Fenway Stevenson book by Paul Austin Ardon, and I'm sure it was, I can't remember, but all his books are the Something Coroner, and it was just the most recent one of that, and that was very good. It kind of delved into like NFTs. Is that the thing for like the weird art thing? And yeah, I think he writes really strong characters that are interesting. So those are my fictions, and my non-fiction is Angela Gallup.
I think my non-fiction one might have been Challenger.
Is that about the
yeah?
Was that not quite hard to read?
Yeah, but it was an interesting read as well. Like the book, it was really good. Donna says she needs to read your recommendations. Have you read From the Dark Room about forensic photography?
No, but it is on my Christmas wish list. So if I don't get it for Christmas, I'm going to buy it for myself in the new year, because it's one of the books on my wish list. Because it looks like it's going to be great. I take it, Donna, you've read that. Is it good?
I'm presuming so. She also says she feels like you and her could chat for ages.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good chat about forensics and books and stuff like that. That I think is actually why I love doing the coaching, because I get to talk to people about story and help them. So it's hard because I've also beta read quite a lot of books this year that aren't yet published, and so it's quite hard to think of something that's actually published that I've loved as well.
Yeah, that's the I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you it's tricky when you come to doing like the top 10 lists and stuff, because sometimes if you've read a book that's not out, I've just read a book that's not currently out, like it has been published before and it's not out at the moment, and it's like
that's really hard. Like there's a book coming out next year. It's called The Goddess of Death, and it's by Rupa Mahadevan. She just won the Joffrey Book Prize, and it is such a good book. Such a good book. So her characters are so interesting. So if you like to have a mix of cultures and ethnicities, and it's all around the Festival of the Dolls, which is a Hindu festival, it's absolutely brilliant. So watch out for that, and watch out for Rupa next year when her first book, her debut comes out. I'm sure it's going to do so well.
I feel like you talk about the fiction books like by the characters being really strong.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? I mean, I love like really interesting characters in a book, and I'm going back to what you were saying about having morally grey characters, because I think your character is really strong and really interesting. And do you think that's like a thing that you think is just really important?
Yeah,
in the story?
Definitely. I for me, if I love the characters, I can forgive some plot points that don't quite add up or that don't quite work. But if I don't personally think that any amount of beautiful prose or amazing plot can make up for two-dimensional or not interesting characters. But I think that really interesting characters can make up for all of those other things. So, and I think that I'm really interested in people, and that's probably where that's driven from. But yeah. And a really good example of that is a series by a Swedish author called Vivica Sten. Her books have been out for ages, and actually I think they've been televised in Swedish, which I don't speak, but I read the translation and I read the first book, and I loved the characters. They were amazing. But I really hated the end of the first book. I was like, that is just such a horrible ending. I don't like it. I don't believe it. I was like, when you put a book down and you're actually really cross about it, like you kind of like stomp around and need to have a moment. But I then I immediately bought the second book and read it, and then I never had that experience with how books again. But because I love the characters so much, I still bought the second book because I was willing to forgive what I consider like a momentary lapse in plot.
One of the books that is going to feature on my top 10, and I'm trying not to give away too many of them, but is because I haven't edited the video yet, is Follow the Butterfly by Marta Kaukonen. She was on the debut panel at Harrogate this year, and her book is about like a female serial killer going to a therapist, and like the person's got to try and almost like stop her. Do you know what I mean? Like pick what she's doing, and that's like told from the point of view of like 4 people, and there isn't really that many more than those 4 people in the book, and it is completely character driven. It is just conversations between people and things. It's masterful. It's like so good.
I'm gonna have to get that. You have to add that to my list.
Still got it. It's high on the top 10.
I think that conversation and character interaction can tell you so much about the people the cast of characters. You can learn so much about them in a moment's conversation, or the way they respond to something, or like a little look between people that tells you so much. And I think when I write, I was going to say I kind of, not that I would ever consider writing for TV, because I don't think that I could write scripts, but in my head it kind of plays like that, like as though I'm watching it on television, and I imagine how that would look, which is why I can look really ridiculous when I write, because I pull faces and I move my hands around to see if that would work. And I definitely do all the face pulling sort of thing that happens when you're trying to describe how somebody like is frowning or gritting their teeth, and I'm kind of like, and I'm really aware. I wasn't for a long time aware of doing it, but because somebody pointed it out to me, I'm obviously now really aware that I do it. I'm really visual with my thought process.
That's interesting. I guess you're going back to your linguistics as well, about people giving away what they're thinking and how they're acting, and that's like quite an interesting way, because I'm wondering if people can sometimes give themselves away. I think there's moments in the book that I read where there's like, she kind of looks at the people and she knows they're not telling her everything, isn't it? She's like very intuitive about the people around her.
Yeah, I think Rowan's had an interesting life, and she starts out the series much more cynical. So when you read book 1, you'll realize that she has actually mellowed quite a lot. But I think that she has felt on the outside of the world looking in for a really large part of her life. And so she's quite an observer of people's behavior. But also I think that even when somebody wants your help, often they're inclined to tell some form of lie to influence what you do next. So even if like they're not bad people, I think that often people will not necessarily outright lie, but they will miss out sections of the truth to paint themselves in a better light. And I think that especially in stress situations, that happens.
Yeah, I think it's just a natural thing, isn't it? People don't even always realize that they are doing that.
Yeah.
And I guess the trick, if you are being someone like a detective, is working out the kind of innocent bits of that, you know, the ones where people are just trying to do, you know, they're feeling uncomfortable or they're trying to make themselves look a bit better, and the ones who are actually the ones who have done the bad thing.
Yeah. And I also think there's a lot of that part where people look at somebody and say, oh, they must be innocent and respectable because of how they are perceived, because of their job title, because of their age, because of this thing or that thing, that they must be the person who is a good, you know, that kind of good, righteous type of person. I think that's quite fun. The next Rowan book, which will be out probably around March next year, actually takes her away from her home setting. It takes her up to the Highlands, where she's gone on holiday, which I think I say at the end of the book of Lie Chantal that so she's gone up to visit a friend, and that was really interesting to write because I didn't have quite the full cast of characters for her to get support from, so it probably raised her heckles in a way that haven't been quite so raised since book one, which was fun.
It's I used to work for someone a long time ago who used to say that, you know, when people judge people about how they are and the ones that look scary and things like that, and she always used to say that the people you should be scared of are the people who don't look like they'd say boo to a goose, you know, like the quiet, unassuming ones. Because whenever you watch the news about the serial killers, they're always like, oh, I lived next door to him and he didn't say boo to a goose, and he was like the nicest, most unassuming.
Yeah.
And she's like, they're the ones.
Yeah, people who look like monsters rarely are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And that's the other thing about the whole linguistics of how we portray people. So if you were to look at newspaper headlines, if you have somebody who's, say, 13, a 13-year-old, female 13-year-old, and they are a victim of a crime, the newspapers will say a child. They'll call her a child. They'll call her a girl. They will use really young language. They'll use really nurturing language. And if she is guilty of a crime, they'll call her a youth, a degenerate. And they will remove that kind of nurturing child language away from her. So you will get two really different versions of the age is irrelevant, but the language really changes when the newspaper wants you to think that somebody is bad or is innocent or is good.
Donna says she's going on a double bluff theory. She was mental but fun. I never thought she'd actually do it.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there is definitely that as well. I think do you know what? I think out in the world there are people harboring all sorts of secrets of varying degrees, you know, and you see that sometimes, don't you? When I don't know how long ago this is because I really struggle to remember when things happen, but I remember seeing a news story where somebody's grandmother died, and when they were emptying the house, they found in the attic a suitcase full of babies, dead babies, like had just been wrapped up, and I think there had been a series of children that the grandmother had not wanted and killed, and just swaddled the babies and put them up in the attic, and they'd kind of mummified. And so that's like, you know, you don't expect that when you're clearing out your granny's attic. And yeah, random things. These things take in my mind because I think at some point I'll use that information. It just kind of, that's why my mind is an odd place to be.
I think I remember reading a crime book that had a similar kind of vibe. Like they went to someone's house and there were these mummified people at the dining table.
Yeah. It's kind of like
thinking, oh, that's quite clever.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you think about the extremes that some people go to. And like you say, they're never the people who look like monsters. The people who look like monsters rarely are. It's always.
Sometimes you not think, like you watch the things about the real monsters. Like I watched a show about Jeffrey Dahmer recently, and the amount of times they could have caught him, and you're like screaming at the TV, going like, "What are you doing?"
I mean, a lot of serial killers are actually really charismatic, charming, engaging people who people would want to be around. They did an experiment where they showed people on the streets in America a picture of Jeffrey Dahmer next to a picture of just some random person, but the other person had like long hair and a beard, and they were like, "Oh, you know, would you get in a car with him, or would you get in a car with him?" And everybody said they would get in a car with Jeffrey Dahmer, except one person who knew who that picture was of, and they were like, "Well, that's Jeffrey Dahmer, so I'm not getting in a car with him." But everybody else was like, "Oh no, he looks like a nice young man." Wrong.
Yeah. It was so infuriating watching the show about him. There's so many times like the police were his, and you were like, what are you doing?
I know it's when you watch like dramatizations of true crime, I'm always cautious of things like that, because I'm always really aware that when it comes to true crime, there are real people who've had their lives completely upended, destroyed, had devastation. So I'm really interested in the forensic part of it. I'm interested in the psychology part of it, but I'm always really cautious to make sure the things that I watch about true crime are done really well.
I think they've got to reflect like the experience of like the victims' families and things.
Yeah.
The thing I watched did do that. It talked
Yeah.
about the people who were like the witnesses, the people who'd died, and the process of like catching him more than it did
Yeah.
focus on like there was no like glorifying of, and I think it's important. But I think you're drawn, and I think you're drawn to crime fiction as well in that way of like exploring why people do the things they do.
Yeah, I always say they shouldn't be whodunits, they should be whydunits. Like, because you want to know that the who makes sense, but by and large, the who doesn't matter to me. It's that I want to know, why did somebody do that? What was the series of events that led to somebody doing that thing?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? It's like unpicking of like how that person ended at that point where that all those things had happened. Or
Yeah.
even in the case of like one crime fictionally, like yours was really good when I read. Like there's a whole, as you go through, your perception of everyone involved changes all the way through.
Mm.
More information comes out and you're re-looking at all the people going, well, did we not know that about you?
Yeah. I think there's a, like, I like to play with people's perception. I definitely enjoy doing that. I enjoy laying down an idea of what or who somebody is, and then upending that and changing your perception on people. I think the why people get to an end point is fascinating, because I do think that it's quite interesting when you look at, like, so I don't know if you watched Sweet Pea when it was on, and she kills people that she doesn't like, and there's part of you that also doesn't want her to get caught, though, because there's, I think for a lot of people there is not that you would do it, but there's a moment of vigilantiness in your brain where you think that person deserves to be punished. And it can be the smallest thing. And I'm probably going to give away far too much about my disturbed psyche by saying this, but years ago I read about a man that, he was only 17, 18, but he was in a McDonald's drive-through car park, and he saw a mother duck and all her ducklings, and he drove his car at them and killed them all. And I was like, well, he'd be on my list. He would be on my list, because I hate that kind of just like senseless stuff. Like, I'm like, you just thought you'd be a big man and kill the innocent animal. But yeah, my brain would be like, well, you're definitely on the list, mate. So I think there's a part of us all that would sometimes like to see a swift hand of karma, at least.
And I think the other thing of like the thing that makes you watch the odd, I very rarely watch true crime stuff. I don't even know why I watched this one. But I think the reason we look at it, and the reason we should look at it, is to look at what we need to learn from it.
Yeah.
Like, why was this what were all the things that were missed? And this was good at pointing that out. What were the things that were missed that could have been done better and could have saved other people in it? Because there are things that we can learn and help people in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at how policing has evolved, and it's definitely not necessarily perfect currently, but if you look at how it was in the 80s compared to now, there's definitely been improvements in how we perceive certain populations of society for the most part. I think I would like to think that the majority of the people in law enforcement are there for the right reasons. I think in any group of people, you get bad, and the bad can destroy the reputation of the majority good, and that's always a shame when it happens. But I think there's a lot of things that have been learned through previous big cases that have helped with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah. Donna has asked, what's the strangest or funniest moment you've ever had an epiphany about plot or character?
When I've had an epiphany about
the plot or characters in your book?
I don't know. I think actually in Sally in the Woods, there's a character in that I always had the intention that he would not be a very nice person, and then I was writing a scene where he meets Rowan in a fast food restaurant, and they had this interaction, and in that moment I was like, I think there's more to this character than I've written. I think he deserves to have more of a story. I think it would be interesting if this was not what meets the eye. So there was that, and then there's a character a bit like that in the new book that's going to come out next year, where I usually it's around morally grey characters. I've written like a character that's really quite horrible, and then I about halfway through go, no, but are they though? And so when I do my second draft, I sometimes have to like just temper down some of the nastiness about them so that they can have the kind of redemption arc. But what I do more often than not is I leave myself problems to solve later. So there is a book where in What She Didn't See, I have Rowan find out that one of the characters has taken £10,000 out of the bank, and I left myself on that note. And then when I came back, I was like, I literally have no idea what I have in mind for this £10,000. And so for the next, I think probably 10,000 words or so, I was like, I had this post-it note, and this was the only thing I had on my wall was, what's £10,000 for? And it was like, I kind of found it a place, and that led to an interesting sort of character development. But I don't really necessarily have epiphanies. And normally that I want to make a nasty character have a kind of a redemption of some sort.
Yeah, but then isn't that a bit more true to real life, I think, because everyone can make mistakes,
yeah,
do wrong things, and it's about how they unpick that and where they go from there.
Yeah, definitely.
A little bit. And Rowan, at least in the book I was reading, seems to be able to judge the people who have made a mistake and are genuinely trying to do things better, and the people who are mistaken are still trying to kind of keep that mistake.
Yeah, definitely. I think she's more willing, I think, to look to be understanding of people and their reasons. She's more willing to hear people out and then make a judgment call. She doesn't suffer from a bias in that respect. She's really all about how honest you are and how you treat her and the way you behave and your story than she is about your job title or who you are. She doesn't really care about any of those things. And yeah, I would say also, God help you if you were to cross her with it or hurt anybody that she loved, because she would come for you. With all she would be unstoppable if you tried to come at the people who are important to her. She wouldn't probably defend herself as hard as she would defend them.
Yeah. She is like such a good, like I said, I'm hooked. You've got me well on the Angela Nurse train of reading everything you've written. So we're definitely well on that journey.
Excellent. But yeah, no, I do you know what? I love writing. I think it's such a genuinely enjoyable outlet for my mind. And when I don't write, I am not as happy a human being because my mind is very busy and I need to put the stories out there. So I think, I'm not gonna lie, I'd always love to earn more money. I think any of us who sat here would be lying if we said, no, I'm all good earning nothing as long as I keep writing. But that being said, I would also still keep writing even if I only sold one book a year, because I love it so much, and the compulsion to tell stories is so ingrained in me that I would still do it. But I would be lying if I said I wouldn't like to earn more money from it, because that would be lovely.
I mean, I think everyone would like to earn more money in life, wouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. That would always be nice, but the writing itself is the thing, and you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't spend the hours that it takes to write 80,000 words, and then edit them, and then edit them again, and then go to somebody else's edits, and then do all those stuff, and do all of the things if you didn't really love the storytelling. And I really love the storytelling. I think it's just fundamentally a really important part of who I am.
Has that always been a thing that you wanted to do then, to write? And
yeah, forever. I can remember being about 4.5, and we were moving house, and I wrote a story on the side of the moving box in crayon, and I'm sure it made no actual sense. But storytelling has always been really important. I touched on earlier on that I didn't have necessarily the easiest of childhood, and what I think for me is that storytelling was the kind of the bubble wrap that protected my brain, it protected my heart, it protected me from when things were going horribly around me in an environment which I couldn't control. I could still tell myself stories. I could still hide in the corner and tell myself stories, and that is a level of protection that I think is really special, and it's really important. I think that storytelling has just always been at the core of who I am.
I could speak to you for hours about what you do. I mean, we've got whole other hours in us about forensic linguistics.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're just going to have to come back again.
Well, I would love to.
At some point, we need to book you back in.
Yeah, I'd love that.
But in the meantime, we've got 2 minutes left of our hour now. It's just
gone so quick.
I know. So anyone who's watched who is as sold on the books as me, what are they going to go away and buy?
So
order.
So go and order Jack in a Box. You can, or any of the one that takes your fancy from the Rowan series, because like I say, you can read them in any order. There's a couple of novellas as well if you want a really quick read, and a Christmas novella there too, which is a bit fun. And then also pre-order A Killer Conversation, which comes out in January, and I'm very excited about. But yeah, order them all. Treat yourself. Order everything.
I mean, it is Christmas, so ordering it all would be a good plan, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and also books make great Christmas presents because they're easy to wrap. Order them all for yourself, order them all for all the people you love.
I would say that. I mean, it's the easiest gift to give, isn't it? Because they're easy to wrap and you enjoy them.
And they are all on KU. So if you are a Kindle Unlimited reader, you can read them on KU. So lots of ways to get them.
Brilliant. Patsy says you have to come back again.
I will, definitely. I'd love to.
Maybe we'll book you in around A Killer Conversation.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Because that is a very different thing to talk about, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would really enjoy that.
Great. And then all that's left to say is thank you. Thank you for sticking with us as well. I'm so sorry about the last time.
These things happen.
Oh, and we're going to leave with Donna's finishing comment. She says she's definitely going to get them. Normally she'd only order the first, but not this time. She's loved every second of this chat. Thank you so much.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate it.
That's a comment she wants to read, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. I love it.
But yeah, that's a good way to end. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.